making sure you can get on.
Thank you.
So we're just doing some last minute organizing and troubleshooting here, but we'll get started right at 30 minutes past the hour.
Sure.
Eric, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Is Montana going to get part of this big heat dome heat wave that we're going to have here in Oregon over the weekend?
I think it's coming a little later. I think like the end of the weekend into next week looks brutal, and into the holiday weekend looks super hot. So not looking forward to it.
Yeah. I had to install some window air conditioning units here at our house and at my mom's house yesterday. So
Yeah.
we're all.
Yeah, it's definitely necessary. Well, we just know, I think Oregon gets a little more of a spring. We just jump right in from, like, we had snow at the end of May and then it was 90, like we don't have much in between. So
Yeah.
I hate to complain, it's a beautiful place to be, but I'd rather a few more spring days, let's just say. I wouldn't even mind rain, not 97 or whatever it says it's going to be.
This is Sharon from Eastern Montana, and yes, we would love rain. We've already lost our crops.
Oh no.
So yeah, almost all of Eastern Montana is in a severe situation. So yes, we're hoping for rain.
Gosh, and it's only June. Oh my God.
Yes, yeah, we've had that heat. We've been in the heat bubble.
Well, and you get it so much worse. I shouldn't complain than we do. But wow, that's terrible. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That worries me about fire season and all, but it's only June.
Yes, indeed.
My family's on the East Coast, and my mom was saying that they're getting it too. So I think it's there's some kind of national heat wave happening. I haven't checked the weather recently, but
Right, you've got the drought in the Southwest. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Well, we have it as 30 minutes past the hour. Kind of a smallish looking group at the moment, but I suspect some people will connect in over the next few minutes. Great. So I think I got to meet most of you last time. My name is Eric Steveotter. I'm with the Region 17 Comp Center. I'm a colleague of Jacob, who is the usual co-facilitator on our side, along with Crystal at OPI. But I'm filling in for Jacob today as he is at a different OPI virtual meeting at the moment. So happy to be here. I recognize some names of people I've worked with before. And so good to see you. And yes, thank you, Mike. Some people are still at that other conference. So we will take that into consideration as we work today and potentially review possible decisions we might factor into if we think we have enough of a quorum or if we want to hold off for a future session. So that's a bit about me. I don't know, in case anyone else is new who wasn't with us last week, Crystal and Tristan, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
So I am Crystal Andrews. I am the Ed Licensure Director here at the OPI. I think I see everyone that has been on the call. I've been keeping track of our roster, but I've been here in this role since April. So I still am learning and have lots to learn. So if there's questions that I cannot answer, well, most of you will probably be able to answer since you are such experts, but also I will take anything back to my team and get things answered, and in case there's something that I am missing. And I appreciate all of you being here. I know that it's a busy time, but this is important work, and I can't wait to get diving into this a little bit more today.
Hello all, I am Tristan Belknap. I just realized that I needed to allow you guys to start your videos as well. So now you should be able to do that if you would like to. I am Deputy Superintendent Cheryl Allen's executive assistant. I will be taking minutes and assisting you guys with anything that you need.
Great. Thank you, Tristan. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. So this is the second of a series of meetings of this task force, which is taking a look at Chapter 57 of the Administrative Rules of Montana and the opportunities therein to increase flexibility and innovation to support Montana having a robust workforce of qualified and effective educators working with Montana's students. So this is sponsored by OPI. The series is sponsored by OPI, with in particular under the leadership of Cheryl Allen, who I don't think will be joining us today, but who gave us a nice kickoff at the start of the process. And with that, what we wanted to do today is just review a couple of things we talked about at the first meeting about norms of behavior. It looks like everyone was here last week, but just to recap, because this is also a public meeting. So in theory, members of the public can be listening in to our conversation. I'm not sure if any are currently, but we're going to assume that what we say is public. So for that reason, this session is recorded, as will all the other focus group or the task force meetings. So
real quick, I'm sorry. I do see a few people are listed in the attendees that should be panelists. So I see you, and I will work with Tristan right now to get you moved over as Eric's talking. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad Crystal and Tristan are much better at Zoom than I am. I'm not sure I could be doing that right now. Okay, so if we could take a look at our agenda real quick here. So yeah, oh, sorry, can you go back? So we'd also like to touch base about something, a report that we put together along with staff from OPI. We did a series of focus groups. Perhaps some of you were part of those conversations. We think it's a useful input for framing this overall process. So we just wanted to make sure that you're aware that that's available, and we might talk about it at a high level. And then we do want to take a look at a couple of items that actually kind of reinforce each other. So we did have a survey we asked people to complete before this session today to help with planning. So we'll take a look at some of that feedback. But we do want to return to the conversation we started last week around the pathway for school counselors to become administrators. That was a specific ask of the deputy superintendent, and so we want to make sure that we're moving that forward as much as we can. And towards the end, what we also want to do is take a look or focus the lens back out and talk about potential areas or ideas or needs that this group could tackle as it looks at the opportunity to propose revisions to Chapter 57. So we've gotten some inputs, some ideas of areas that the task force could work on. We want to see if there's additional input all of you have. And then at the very end, we want to talk a bit about next steps. in terms of whether and what we still need to continue to do with the counselor administrator question, as well as additional topics that this group would like to undertake. So before we dive in, are there any questions about this agenda? No. Okay. All right. Thank you, Crystal. If we could just do the quick recap, just so folks can remember. So, yep, feel free to use the chat. If you want to ask questions or indicate agreement or make recommendations or share links. Please also raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized. We might also use this tool if we end up taking a vote on something. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking to reduce background noise. And please make sure that your name shows correctly. As Crystal said, she's taking attendance, or she's not like she's tracking your participation, but she's keeping herself and us aware of who's coming to these meetings. So if your screen name does not say your current name, we had our daughter's name on ours this morning. I had to quickly change that on the fly in the middle of the meeting. But if you could make sure that your screen name is your real name. And then in terms of other group norms on the next slide. So these are what we agreed to at the last session. So being respectful, being supportive, being present, and being open. And then finally, we had all agreed last time that we'll operate together as a group under the assumption of goodwill and agreement around these items. We will move forward with changes once consensus is reached. And that consensus does not mean it's a unanimous consensus, but it does mean, as you can see the items listed here, I can live with the decision. I will support my colleagues in implementing this decision, and I will do absolutely nothing to impede the implementation of the decision. So in terms of that consensus, we all agreed last time that that will be a supermajority of the task force members present at the time a decision or a choice is made. So it's possible we may have one or two of these opportunities for a decision or consensus today, or we may not. We may feel like we're not quite ready. But either way, should we get to that point, that is how we will make a choice or a decision. Okay. Okay. Yes, so this is a little bit of a shift from our agenda, but actually this works well because this was a topic we talked about last time, and one that we want to see if we can move forward or see if we still need to do additional work. So, so the issue of the school counselor to administrator pathway. We had a lot of good discussion about this. There was also another feedback group that was convened earlier this week. Hopefully I think this was explained at the start of the process, but in addition to this task force, there's another group that meets just once a month to hear about the things that all of us are talking about in this group. And it serves as another opportunity for other folks who are maybe in an outer ring of informants to this process to hear about what we're talking about and give feedback. There were so many folks that were interested in this feedback process to keep these task forces manageable. We couldn't have 50 to 70 people in each of these meetings. So while this group is sort of the first or the leader of the conversation, we are looking for a broader set of stakeholders to hear what we're doing, give input, ratify, or give us gentle correctives if we're missing something. And so that group actually met on Monday. And a lot of that conversation, I would say, mirrored some of the conversations that we had here around school counselors. So this could be a fairly short first item, but So we did spend some time at the last meeting talking about the requirements of what it takes to be a school counselor in Montana, as currently articulated in ARM 10.57.435. I think a lot of that conversation was many of us, myself included, kind of wrapping our heads around this because we probably don't think about this particular ARM much. So we had questions about, well, what does a regionally accredited mean? Questions around the requirements of the master's degree. I think if you go to the next slide, Crystal, you'll see some of the questions that people had asked. So these were questions we talked about last time. Okay, and then if you want to go to the next slide, Crystal. Okay, so we did ask a question in the survey as we were putting together this meeting that we had hoped provided some clarity, but we think might have actually caused a little bit of confusion. We wanted to see if this group thought it was important to revisit this ARM specifically and sort of take on a review of the licensing of school counselors as school counselors. So separate from the question of if and whether and how a school counselor should or be permitted to become an administrator, we just wanted to confirm if this group felt that the requirements for a school counselor are satisfactory, or if you had questions around that, or if this group thought it saw an opportunity to revisit this. So I think it's on the next slide, Crystal. And this is where I think some confusion potentially crept into our survey. So we were asked what we wanted to ask, and the survey was not scientific in any way. So this was not a binding vote in any way. This was just meant to gather input. So what we had meant to ask in the survey, and thank you if you took that survey, was, do we want to look at the current requirements for licensure of a school counselor? Does this group want to take that on? And as you can see, the results, it was split. Of the 10 people that responded, 5 said yes and 5 said no. But if you read the specific suggestions and recommendations, so the first one, someone listed option for experienced certified teachers to earn counselor certification. So that clearly is someone who's interested in someone becoming a school counselor. But the remaining comments, or at least the next 2, do seem to be speaking specifically about, or seem more closely aligned with, our conversation about the counselor to administrator pathway. So, for example, the second bullet is talking about 3 years teaching experience. We know that is a requirement of administrator licensure. So I think that's commentary that is helpful for that other question. The third bullet you see references administrator license. So that clearly relates to that conversation we will circle back to. And then the last bullet talks about clarity and provisional, which we touched on last time as well. So the pathway for a counselor to become an administrator through both the standard pathway through class 3 licensure or through the provisional class 5 licensure. So my apologies if we've sort of muddied the situation, but I think if you go to the next slide, Crystal. Okay. I think we want to just revisit that question. So we're not talking about a counselor becoming an administrator. We just want to see, does this group want to take on a review of this specific set of requirements for a professional to be a school counselor. My sense last time was once people kind of understood all that was here, that wasn't necessarily on the plate, but I don't want to assume that. And so I just want to see if it looks like from our survey, one person thought that there's some potential here for this group to take a look at what it takes to be a school counselor. And I think we probably have leeway to do that. But I think I would just like to just double check to make sure that I and Crystal and others are not making some assumptions. So
sorry. I can tell you too, we also have quite a few more people this week here that were not here last week. So it would probably be a good time to have them look over it and give their opinion.
Okay.
Just so that we're including, we have quite a few more here. And I see McCall has her hand up as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, is there an option for us to re-vote again right now? I mean, it seems like there's more than 10 people on, and maybe having the conversation, if we re-voted it, could add more clarity.
Yes, certainly. And that poll was not only not scientific, but it was not public. So it was not binding in any way. But yes, so now I think if we feel this rises to the level where it does need a decision, then yes, we can take a vote. So that is the decision point here. So our change is needed to the specific arm that relates to the licensure of school counselor. So that's the question on the table. Let's kind of open it up to discussion. Okay, thank you. Mike is asking a question. Is there a current pathway from teacher to counselor? Okay, and so in one sense, I suppose this is the pathway, but there may be more to it than that. So is there anyone who has a better...
My understanding of this is that you can drop a certificated teacher on a class 3 while they pursue their master's in counseling, but it's still the full master's, whereas in special ed you can run it through whatever that 12 credit or basically a 1-year program to get that special ed endorsement, as opposed to a full master's degree in addition to your teaching license.
Okay. Let's see, I saw someone had a hand up.
That'd be me, Sharon.
Yes.
I think based on what I heard last time from this group, that folks weren't necessary, and I would stand with this, that I wasn't necessarily thinking that there needed to be changes to the class 6 specialist licensed school counselor portion, rather to the arm that has to do with principal or administrator licensure.
Okay. Yeah. And as I said, that was kind of our take too, but we just wanted to make sure we were clear. It sounded like this might be the first time some folks were kind of taking a look at this, and maybe there was some opportunity to revisit this. Okay. So floor is still open. Any other questions about this or discussion? Okay, so just let's see. I don't know, Crystal, what do you think? Does that rise to the level of a vote, or do we feel we have a sense that that wasn't necessarily an original question?
I think because we have so many more faces here today, and we don't know who the 10 people were that did vote. I think we could just do a quick vote and then we could move on from there.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
Okay, so let's see. So we have one, as I'm counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I count 15 panelists other than the 3 of us co-presenters who are not voting, I believe.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten clarity on that. I thought I would be voting, but I will stick me out of it until I get a little more clarity.
Okay. Okay. So maybe unless we want to try to throw a poll together real quick, which might take a little too long,
I
maybe we
don't
can.
think we can once the webinar, since it's a webinar, since it
Okay.
started. So I'd say we just do, raise your hand if you would like to look at the language or whatever, whichever way you want to do it, Eric, you know better.
Yeah.
How about the hand raise for one of them?
Okay, so yeah, if you can use your, if you have access to your Zoom toolbar, why don't we use the raise hand tool? And so let's see. What is 60% of 15? I don't know, I was a liberal arts major, so let's see, would that be 10?
I think 9.
9, okay. Okay, oh, looks like we're not quite ready there. So Valerie asked, can we have a discussion on Mike's question? Okay. Yes, we can. If folks feel they're not quite ready to. So Mike, do you feel you heard enough, or would you like, should we continue to, or is there more to be that you feel should be said or discussed?
Oh, I'm good. Nick answered my questions. I just wanted to make sure that there was some type of pathway to go. So Nick took care of it for me. Thanks, Nick.
Okay. All right. So what we're voting on is, as currently written, ARM 10.57.435, which is the Class C specialist license for school counselors. What you see on the screen is how the ARM is currently worded. So the question is this, or does this task force want to review and potentially revise this ARM specific to school counselors? And so if you think yes, this task force should take a closer look at how school counselors are licensed, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing 2 raised hands from Christine and Corinna. Apologies if I mispronounce anyone's name. Okay, so if the 2 of you could please lower your hands. Okay, if you do not think this task force, if you think this ARM is sufficient, or that this task force does not need to undertake a review of this ARM at this time, please raise your hand. Okay, so I see, it looks like a majority. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so I count 11 hands raised. I don't think we need a roll call on this one. Okay, so we're over 9. So this task force is recommending that this ARM will stay as is for the time being. Thank you, everyone. Okay. All right, so it's good that we have that clarification. And this does help us because a bigger question, which we will now return to, should there be a pathway for a school counselor to become an administrator, either through the standard licensure, the Class 3, or through the provisional licensure, Class 5? So this is a slide we had last time. So a barrier to this pathway is, and we spent time discussing this last week, is, as you can see in the highlighted space, that there's a teaching requirement. Okay. So we had discussion about this. Things people pointed out are, and also the feedback group that met earlier this week also pointed this out. There's some pros and there's some cons. Folks have shared how, and I thought this was interesting. So apparently this pathway was open to counselors in the past, but in changes in, it was either 2015 or 2017, that pathway was closed for school counselors. And those of you that have been around a bit longer than some of us, maybe 2015. Okay, yes. So maybe you can give us context that might be helpful around that. So that was one issue. Others have pointed out how, as currently prepared, counselors are learning about and applying some of the skills that teachers use. They're evaluated in this somewhat analogous way that teachers are evaluated, teacher evaluation being a key sticking point in this conversation. So this is a potentially large change. So we do want to feel we've aired this out completely. And I'm seeing some hands raised, so I should stop talking. Diane, I see that your hand is raised. Do you have a question or a comment, or?
I think I just didn't lower my hand.
Okay.
That's okay. I did have questions about teacher evaluation, and I think I would like to hear, I would like it vetted. I think that there are many ways that this could be resolved for me. I would like to hear from others in the group, their ideas as well. I do understand that counselors are evaluated by administrators who haven't been counselors, and that teachers of many sorts are evaluated by administrators that haven't had expertise in that area. And yet I want to be sure that this issue is discussed and resolved for the majority of our group, that with the tools that we have available, whether it's mentoring or guidance on the evaluation program, that we've discussed and can be assured to a reasonable point that we will ensure excellence for students by having vetted and had this discussion about the evaluation component and how, and perhaps beyond that, the teaching experience that could be documented in some way. The counselors do teach in schools, many of them do, most of them do likely handle classes. So is there another way that those two things can be addressed? I'd be interested in hearing from the group, if I might.
Sure. I see Valerie has her hand up. Or maybe that's, oh, okay, Valerie. Or was that your vote from the previous voting exercise?
That's my vote.
Eric, I don't know if I have a hand emoji. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I'm just going to do this, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
To just visit. One of the issues that you just raised that came out of the group earlier this week was this idea that they're evaluated separate from teachers by an administrator in their district. I guess I taught in only 2 districts, and if I recall correctly, our counselors were under the same CBA as our teachers. And therefore, I guess it would lead me to understand that the evaluation tool for them would have been the same. And I guess I just would like clarification on that. I mean, do administrators evaluate their school counselors under a separate evaluation tool? And is that collectively bargained?
Okay, I see Nick nodding his head there. So Nick, sounds like you might have something or have some experience with that.
Yeah, Angela, you're spot on with that. We keep our counselor as part of the negotiated agreement. Thus, it's negotiated that they are evaluated using the same tool that we use for our classroom teachers. To take this discussion maybe a little bit further, building administrators and of course district administrators also evaluate the administrators. They evaluate the buildings and ground superintendents, our bus drivers and custodians, and all of those come with a fairly prescribed tool that we use. So yes, Angela, I think most guidance counselors fall under the CBA. So then unless it's specifically negotiated otherwise, we're bound to evaluate them using whatever was agreed upon in the last negotiation session.
Great, thank you. FC Corinna, you had your hand up.
Hi. So we also evaluate our counselors, and they are under the CBA. They also teach classes, and they are excellent teachers. And I do think that 3 years of teaching experience can hinder counselors trying to get their administrative endorsement.
Okay, Sean, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah. Can you all hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
We're good. Great. Perfect. Yeah, in my mind, I think definitely counselors should be able to get an administrative license, principal or superintendent. And again, with that barrier of 3 years of teaching experience, so a standard unrestricted license at the secondary level, and I'm not sure, I guess at this point, just walking into the conversation, I was just at another meeting, but walking into the conversation, that being a barrier, I'm not sure how gets overcome, but I think definitely that whatever we can do to overcome that particular barrier is necessary. Once again, I would just go back and say, I think counselors should have that pathway.
Okay. Erica, I saw you had a hand up.
Yes, we also evaluate in the 2 schools I did evaluations on, our counselors using the same CBA mandated tools, my teachers. I've worked in 5 different districts, and in all of those districts, our counselors have taught. As Sharon brought up last week, not all counselors do teach so. So it'd be nice if we could find some kind of language in here. The hard part is when they put the minimum of 3 years with an unrestricted license. I don't think the 3 years teaching is the problem, because many of our counselors are teaching. We need to find a way that we can show that they are teaching them other than having that unrestricted license.
Okay. Nick, I saw you had a hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I absolutely concur with that last comment there. My question was going back to Karina's comment earlier, that their guidance counselors were teaching classes. So then my question was, are they teaching under a teaching license, or are they co-teaching, or is there a different teacher of record? My interpretation, if they are teaching with that license, they should be eligible. Which brings the question, if they are teaching without that license, then are they eligible? I mean, the way it reads, unrestricted license, which wouldn't work. But I guess that was my question.
Sharon, I saw you had a hand up.
Right. I agree with those folks who have addressed the counselors who haven't progressed to the Class 6 specialist without the previous teaching license. I still have a concern about that. However, what I'm hearing also, and I do agree with, is some way to document those 3 years of teaching experience while the counselor is in fact in a counseling position. Also, I am quite a lot more in favor, not of a 416, but of the provisional license, because I believe that while the counselor would have that provisional license, they could in fact take some more courses on the pedagogy if in fact they didn't have a K-12 standard teaching license first. So I feel like having the provisional license would allow that process to occur.
I want to jump in real quick. Mike, just a comment in the chat. And there'd be a form that an administrator could sign and submit attesting to a counselor having taught classes in order to fulfill the teaching requirement.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm
Sharon.
sorry. We already have, the Board of Public Ed or the Office of Public Instruction has a process similar to that in place with administrators having 5 years of teaching experience from out of state. And I know that on the Board of Public Ed, we made that rule change before, and there in fact does exist a form to allow an administrator to attain licensure in Montana in that way. So it seems like it would be a very small step to have a similar form where a counselor supervisor fills out that necessary form for their experience with regard to teaching. And in fact, whether or not the counselor supervisor would even recommend a provisional license as an administrator.
Okay, Sean, I see you have your hand up.
I don't think I put it down. Sorry about that, you guys.
Oh,
But,
okay.
Again, I'm not sure, and I guess there's probably reasons. I'm just not sure. I'm clear in my mind why. And I realize how 1057-416 reads around a minimum of 3 years of teaching experience and so on and so forth. From a counselor perspective, why are we stuck? Are we stuck on having to have that teacher, that 3 years of teaching experience? Because a counselor may some of the counselors are teaching and some of them aren't. If they aren't, or if they're only teaching part-time, they won't teaching classes maybe every quarter, every other quarter, something that's not consistent. That kind of stretches out that time frame. Are we stuck to the fact that they have to have that 3 years of teaching experience, even though they're going to be probationary during that time when they're earning a master's in educational leadership and moving forward in the administration kind of career area? I guess that's my question. And I will lower my hand
now. Corinna?
So I think, at least in our districts, a lot of times our counselors are administrators when the administration are gone. So they do a lot of work to help behind the scenes, sometimes more so than others. And I think that shouldn't restrict them because they haven't had their 3 years of teaching. I just continue to advocate for our counselors to be able to do something different than to have that restriction. And I know they do a lot of social emotional training. They do a lot of bully prevention, and that falls in line with a lot of what our administrators have to deal with.
Yeah, I would concur with Karina's statement. I think that our counselors are being asked to wear a lot of hats, just in respect to the work we do at our office. I mean, I can think of a number of reasons why they would be interacting with teachers, interacting directly with students in classrooms, as far as college access, FAFSA completion, decision day. ACT, any number of things. And then Karina just indicated that in some spaces they may be engaging with superintendents and engaging with principals and acting roles of as school leaders on a temporary basis. And to circle back to one of the things that Diane asked, I think for a clear understanding of where maybe have the conversations gone and who has been involved in those conversations, as far as the evaluation piece in particular, that is something that I referenced last week, that our group that we pulled together to look at this spoke to, was that evaluation piece. And we had folks from our educator prep programs, from our ed leadership divisions, and they spoke specifically to the evaluation preparation that our school leaders are getting in their programs. And so I think what's really important for folks to remember today is that evaluation, understanding of that evaluation piece is something that we don't just expect counselors to come into the position with. It's something that once they make this move to become a school administrator and go through the ed leadership programs, hopefully in the Montana University system, but once they make that decision to go into one of those programs, that they get that understanding, that they develop that and strengthen that. And I know that that's something that I never got even as a teacher, is an understanding of how to evaluate. And in fact, that's something that is difficult for me to this day, was to evaluate or to sit in on opportunities to score other teachers and help them towards improvement. It was a real challenge. And so I think that we had an opportunity in October to bring folks from our ed leadership programs, our counseling programs in the Montana University system together to fully vet, how these pieces could merge. And one of the points that I made last week was in regards to the Danielson evaluation framework is used to evaluate school counselors. And that's something that I spoke to last week, something that folks get training on. And this conversation is one that I think is really important, I think, to provide ease of movement for these folks who would decide to make this change in their career.
Okay, I say, Sean, you have your hand up, and then I see a comment in the chat from Heather.
Yeah, and I was just going to speak to the last couple of speakers and to Heather's comment as well. And in my mind, again, it's within that 1A, 3 years of experience and so on. In my mind, it seems like, and I'm not sure what would be the qualifying sort of requirement, but like unrestricted license at the secondary level, or 3 years of experience as a counselor within the district, or something like that. And I'm as far as what's that 3 years of experience or 5 years or whatever it might be, that's what I think would be kind of important, is in order to be able to get counselors into those positions, because we're short on administration throughout the state as well. So if they're interested, I think it's a great thing to do it. Thank you.
Okay, Diane, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I appreciated Sharon Carroll's suggestion for a potential way to document this experience with two components. As I heard Sharon, she can correct me if I'm misstating. One, that the person has had experience, and two, that the administrator would recommend this individual, or the supervising administrator would recommend this person. I think that's kind of a twofold test that might be considered. And Sharon can fill that in more for us if she would.
Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
I agree. I agree, Diane. That's what I intended.
And you also, Sharon, floated the idea, well, maybe the pathway would go through the provisional license. And then that way there's a test and an opportunity for the person to get experience that they might have or build some experience in some of the areas that they will then need once they're fully licensed.
Correct. I just don't see in the class 3 administrative endorsement where there is a provision allowed for that there. I see the recommendation for the endorsement from the appropriate official in E, and I see a D. But maybe the C, completion of an accredited professional educator preparation program for secondary principals. I just think that maybe 416 doesn't address everything that we were talking about here in terms of the recommendation and the verification of experience. I might be wrong there. Somebody correct me.
Okay. All right. Other just
Clarify where we're at
Sure.
right now. So I guess what I'm understanding then the path then for a counselor to administration, the only path then for a counselor directly to administration wouldn't be direct. It would be through a provisional license first.
I think that's a proposal. That could be one thing that this group recommends. So, and we can keep discussing this. I think possibly a question, if we wanted to move ahead a little bit in the slides, Crystal, a clarifying question. And maybe we're ready to answer it and maybe we're not. So this slide here, this was some of the items we discussed last time. So we covered these before, but questions around teaching experience. Yeah, so all of these comments talk about teaching experience. It touches on evaluation in the third bullet, so things you folks are sharing today. Okay, and then on the next slide. Okay, so this is just a restatement of the previous slide. So I think a potential decision point right now, if you go to the next slide, Crystal. Oops.
Hold on, I'm sorry. It opened the link. Is this it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so, I don't think we're ready to talk specifics because there's a lot of good ideas. But the more you get specific, the more there are more opportunities and challenges and more nuance and more intersections with other things to consider. So again, we don't have to answer this question now if folks don't feel ready for it, but a high level question at this point is, as we see it potentially, is should a pathway to administrator licensure be opened or reopened, acknowledging some past history there, but should a pathway to administrator licensure be open for school counselors and other specialists through the standard class 3 or provisional class 5 licensure process? So this is like the 50,000 foot level. Does this task force feel ready to say, yes, there should be a pathway to administrative licensure for school counselors or other specialists through the licensure process? So again, if we felt by the end of today we're ready to decide this, we could take a vote. If we're not ready, we could certainly table it for more discussion and research. Okay, I see that triggered a lot of raised hands. I didn't quite see who was first, so my apologies. Let's see, how about Sharon? You're muted, Sharon.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood and probably raised my hand because yes, the pathway should be there. So I will lower my hand.
Okay. Nick.
Thank you. This may be a piece of semantic, but my concern is with having the and other specialists
Oh, true.
bit in there. Is now we're looking at, is an OT license adequate to get a superintendent endorsement?
Right.
Yeah, that's, I guess my issue is just with those 3 words.
Okay. Erica?
My question would be a clarification. Are we talking, because I absolutely believe there should be a pathway, but are we talking and or both for a class 3 or class 5? I think there should be I guess I'll go back a step. If I'm looking to use a class 5, it's usually for somebody who has not met all of the educational requirements. And so it would buys us time to give them that 3 years to meet the education requirements. But if they have, then we should be able to give them a class 3. So I just want to make sure that we're talking about, as this reads, that we could use either or pathway.
Right. And maybe that got a little too detailed in that question. Maybe the question is simply, should a pathway to administrator licensure be open or reopened for school counselors? So the specialist, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, the only other currently licensed equivalent specialist is a school psychologist. Is that right? Or are there other specialists that have other class 6 professionals?
School counselors, school psychologists are the only 2.
Okay.
You are correct. So do we want to just stop the conversation for a second as I see it's 2:23 and vote to say, yes, we want to explore a pathway, or no, we'll make that consensus now and then continue. I think we know the answer, but why don't we do a vote so that it's on record and we can then go forward from there?
Okay, I do think folks do have some good points about this question. So I don't know if we want to do a quick edit on the question, just so folks feel comfortable. Basically, what we're saying is we're not going to get into specifics today. We don't have time. So in future work of this task group will be to get into the weeds of what this will look like specifically. So what we're asking in the group to ratify right now, or not ratify, is should there be a path to administrator licensure for school counselors? And we can take a little more discussion on that. Let's see, Nick, I saw your hand up. Oh, you might be muted, Nick.
I've been doing this Zoom thing for a year and a half. I would be in favor of striking the and other specialists and call for the question.
Okay. Sean, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Nick on that, I think, because we are speaking specifically around counselors. But I'm not sure, I think maybe it was Erica. It was the statement was counselors through the standard class 3 or provisional licensure process, and that as originally written. Do we need simply the or an and or? It's not going to be one and the other. It will probably be one or the other, I suspect. And I just wanted to make that point, and I'm not sure what the right answer is on it.
Or do we just end the sentence after counselors? Should a pathway to administrator licensure be reopened or opened for school counselors? And then it will be up to this group to figure out what exactly that would look like. Is that going to go through the standard path? Is that going to go through the provisional path? What are the specific details for how that will be done? What is some sample language we can recommend for specific changes in the ARM? Or do folks want to preserve some sense now at this high level that there might be 2 possible paths, or is that too granular for right now? Okay.
Could you just put the word counselors through the standard, or either the class 3 or the class, so just put in the word either and then take out and leave in or.
Okay. John?
Thanks, Eric. Lots of really interesting conversation. And one of the things that you mentioned early on in this meeting was that there was, kind of review session. And I think that was earlier this week or late last week. I missed what you said there. As they heard that we were discussing this, were they kind of thinking one direction or another? I kind of like the idea of just having the really high level question, stopping after school counselors. I was just curious if they had any feedback.
Yes, as I said, a lot of their conversation, we actually have some notes we can share with you all. We can post it to the shared Google site from that session. So it kind of ranged over the place. They kind of talked about some of the same issues that all of us here have talked about. Tristan and Crystal, I think you were there as well. I don't know if we specifically got into class 3 versus class 5 or got to that level of detail.
I would say no, there were no specific suggestions made, but the minutes for the feedback group can be found on your Google site under session 2.
Okay. And I'm just giving them a quick skim right now. And no, I don't think they got that far into the detail. So again, that possibly could be a little more detail than we need right now. So my recommendation might be to, and I'm happy to be overruled, maybe to be just end the sentence after counselors, with the understanding that what that looks like specifically, this group will continue to discuss and research and develop proposals around.
Eric McCall has her hand up as well.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to make the same suggestion that we should end after counselors for the sake of time, knowing that we are going to move forward and determine whether it's going through a class 3 or a class 5 and be able to take a vote. So maybe we can move on to some other slides.
Okay.
All in favor with that recommendation? So we can move forward. There we go. I like how it puts all the hands at the top.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 7 electronic. Okay, they're coming some more. Okay, so now I count 12 electron. Okay, all right. So we're going to strike all the language up to counselors. Okay. Okay. So that sounds like a simple sentence, but actually it does have some long-term implications. So is there any further discussion on this topic, or are folks feeling ready to vote? Okay, Mike, I see your hand raised. Or was that a vote? A relic of the vote? Okay. I'm guessing that's a vote relic. Okay, so yes, so the question on the table is, are we going to recommend to the superintendent of public instruction to recommend to the Board of Public Ed that a pathway to administrator licensure be opened or reopened for school counselors? So if you say yes, you agree with this question or statement, please raise your hand. Okay, is anyone? Okay, Angela, I see your hand is raised. Okay, it looks like it's unanimous. Okay, all right. So thank you, everyone. So this task force agrees to the question, and now the particularly. So I think this is an important point in milestone here to recognize. So thank you all. I know people have been talking about this for a while, including the group that Angela was referring to, the meeting of the deans. So I do feel like that wasn't it seems like a simple question, but I think it is an accomplishment. But now it does commit us to digging in a bit more and getting into some more specifics. And we only have another 30 minutes or so. And I'm not sure that would be able to get much further along. And also talk about some other ideas or taking a look at what else should be on this group's agenda. So I'm just thinking in terms of process, what might be a good next step? Is there a subgroup possibly who might be willing to meet? I'm just trying to think in terms of process. We could give, so if some people are really fired up about this, we could commission a subcommittee. We also in our planning survey suggested some possible wording to change the ARM itself. But then we've also heard some really good additional ideas today, like maybe routing candidates through the provisional path first, or using some sort of form or sign off for a counselor's supervisor or administrator, verifying experience and ability to serve as an administrator. So yeah, we could have a subcommittee work on that. We could do a little bit of work on our side here as the organizers to kind of pull out the arms. What do folks feel like they still need as inputs, or what would be important to consider as this group moves this forward and thinks about the specifics of how this would work to get a school counselor into an administrator position? Okay, so one idea is a subcommittee, and looks like Sharon is willing to serve on that. Is there anyone else that might like to work with Sharon? So again, nothing would be voted on or decided outside of this task group. So this is homework. So any subcommittee can go off and work on their own with the understanding that they'll bring back to this larger group any research or draft proposals that they formulate. John, you have your hand raised. Is that a question or are you volunteering?
I'd be happy to assist Sharon. I am on vacation this week. I made an exception for this meeting, but next week I'd be happy to help if needed.
Okay. Okay. Looks like Karina is willing to help with that. Sorry, was that you, Karina, or was that someone else? Okay, Karina.
Be happy to serve as well. Sorry, my volume.
Okay, so Crystal. Okay. Okay, so Crystal, Karina, John, and Sharon.
And
Okay.
McCall Flynn.
Okay. 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 I think that's a good working group size. Others, if this is something you'd like to help out with, you're certainly willing to as well. But I appreciate the five of you, Crystal, Karina, John, Sharon, and McCall, for kind of getting us started. Just if you want to go forward in the slide just a little bit. So in the survey that we had to plan the meeting, we had one possible approach, and that would be a wording change in the ARM. So, this could be something you could consider or not. But we'll go ahead and just leave this out there as one possibility that the group could explore. And let's see. Okay, yeah. So one thing we should do, Tristan, is make sure that the subcommittee has that that planning survey result, or at least these slides, because there are some suggested wording changes. So if you go to the next slide, Crystal. Okay, and then here's some, possible changes around the provisional license. So we won't vote on this. We'll let our subcommittee decide if this is useful or not. They may come up with something entirely different. Okay. So there is a meeting on the calendar for next Thursday, the 1st. It looks like it will run. Crystal, you had shared, you didn't get much feedback from folks that they would not be able to make it. So it's our understanding that that meeting is happening, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we don't want people to feel left out if their 4th of July weekend starts earlier. So, but maybe our subcommittee can kind of work out between themselves any additional nuances of the calendar so that people feel included. Okay. Okay, so that is the school counselor topic. That it was an important topic, and it was a specific charge from the deputy superintendent. So thank you to all of you for participating in this and making a decision to continue this group's work on that topic. Since we do have the opportunity to look at other parts of the ARM around licensure, we wanted to get a sense of some other emerging themes. So let's see, I think it might be a previous slide. Crystal, could you go back one for a second? Sorry, I'm not remembering the order. Okay, one more back. Okay, so so as we look at chapter 57, there's other classes of licenses. Some that we've talked about, some that came up through other venues. I don't think we're going to have time today to commit ourselves to any additional topics right now. But we might, if folks are interested, we might be able to get another subcommittee started, possibly. So in addition to the counselor to administrator pathway, looks like Christine had to drop off. Thank you. Okay. Oh, and Sharon had a question. So would we, as the comp center or with OPI, facilitate that subcommittee work? So Crystal, I won't speak for you in your capacity. We could certainly, as the comp center, advise and would be happy to listen in and provide support where we can. I'm not sure what would be done under the purview of OPI for this. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I do know that I can be available to help take notes and assist you in any capacity you need. I do think I have the understanding, though, that it does not need to be a public meeting, correct?
Yes, that's our understanding. The subcommittees can do work offline and out of the public, but anything that is brought to anything that this group here would vote on needs to be public, needs to be debated and voted on publicly, as we're doing now.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if that's just a simple email sent to all of us, and then maybe we can just start a live Google Doc, or I don't really know how, if seems to me like maybe state government doesn't have, do you guys do, you don't, right? I would, yeah. Maybe we could just start an email group and kind of email back and forth with reply alls to craft our language. So then we're not set on trying to figure out a specific date and time to meet. I don't know if that's a good idea though, but others can chime in.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of work would have to happen asynchronously. So one possibility might be to put up the ARM language on some sort of online document, and then invite your group to go through and add comments and potential wording changes. And then once you reach a critical mass of input, then you could see if you want to have a meeting to debrief it first, or if you feel like it's ready to share with us on July 1st.
Perfect. So maybe somebody from OPI would start that document. Would that, is that, I'm sorry to ask, to have another ask.
No, Sharon, I can certainly set that up.
Okay.
Is I will create an email group with the emails that I have. I do need to make sure that they're all Gmail capable if we're going to be using Google Docs.
And I don't know that state government has, are you allowed, McCall and others, to use Google Docs?
Yes, we can collaborate outside of the OPA.
Okay. So I think that I've shared a different email address with you. So I'll just respond on the chat with the email address that's a Gmail one.
That would work.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Tristan. Okay, so yes, so are there other areas of chapter 57 that this task group, this task force would like to take a look at? So in the planning survey for this meeting, we asked folks what additional topics they'd like to look at, and we got 2 responses. So so someone wants to look at 1057-410, the standard teacher license. I don't know if the person who put this in is on the call right now, because I'm not sure if that was, they just wanted to look at class 2 generally, or they had there was a specific part. It looks like it could be around it looks like it could be around the praxis. That's how I read it. Does anyone recognize this as their submission?
It was mine.
Okay.
This is Heather Jarrett. And it's a few things. So I run into problems with teachers who are nationally board certified, and that has not actually assisted them in licensure, which is a problem. And it's specifically because of the wording endorsement in an approved Montana endorsement. So I'd like that to be looked at, as well as the praxis.
Okay.
So really that whole that whole piece, I think, needs to just kind of be talked about. I think, you know, there's others as well that have issues with the praxis, but that national board piece also of that, I think, is important to review.
Okay. National board certification and praxis. Thank you. And then someone else suggested changes to class 8 and class 4. So I know class 4 are the CTE licenses. Class 8, is that the language class?
Dual credit.
Oh, dual credit. That's right. Okay. So dual credit. Okay, and then the feedback group on Monday. So they talked about so reciprocity, and there's kind of 2 ways of looking at reciprocity. One is where if you're licensed in one state, you're automatically, or with a minimum of effort, you're automatically licensed in a second state. But then there's also kind of an understanding of reciprocity is like how closely lined up are Montana's requirements with the requirements of other states. So are there little misalignments that maybe make things a little bit harder for an otherwise qualified and experienced educator to work in Montana? Or is there unnecessary friction in the process for that person to be employed in Montana? Praxis had also come up, and then we did also talk about the class 4 CTE licenses as well. So if you want to go to the next slide, Crystal, just to kind of open the floor, and this may be all that we have time for today, and then maybe at the next meeting we might have to do some review and prioritization around this. Are there any other rules within chapter 57 that you would like this task force to look at? Or is there a reason you signed up to be a part of this because you had a particular need or interest or desire to improve chapter 57 in a specific way? So why don't we just open up discussion on that? So feel free to raise your hand or type anything in the chat. Okay, John, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I can't remember if it's in 57 or not, but it does pertain to licensing. When we do class fives in the BPE internship, there's a distinction between a class 5 and a BPE internship, that the BPE internship has to be done with a Montana approved preparation program, but the class 5 does not. And so I was wondering if that would be appropriate for this discussion, or if that would be in a different section.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that term. What does BPE stand for? Oh, right. Okay. Yes. I should have realized that. I thought it had some, was very specific to some educator specialty area. Okay, so internship in class 5. Okay, let's see. Crystal, do we want to edit the slide real quick and maybe just add that suggestion from John real quick?
Say it again, so I'm sorry. For the internship.
Yeah, looking at the Montana Preparation College and their role with the class 5 versus BPE internship. So BPE internship, it's very clear it has to be Montana prep, but in class 5 there is no Montana
Got it. Yeah.
prep program requirement.
Okay. All right, other areas of chapter 57 licensure that this group potentially, this isn't committing us to anything right now, although probably by next week, we will want to commit ourselves to a short list of additional areas to explore. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional suggestions. So, we have the class 2, the national board, both the national board certification and the praxis issue.
Eric,
Yes.
Sharon stated
sorry.
in the comments, urge caution with
Reciprocity. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, it sounds simple in theory, but it's not, and brings up questions about what is unique and important in Montana that everyone desires to preserve, and what do you want to protect and not lose if in the name of efficiency. So I think we can give you some homework. We have a report that we collaborated with the OPI on around reciprocity. So I think we can make that available. You could take a look at. Okay. So we can share that around. So praxis is clearly something that keeps coming up in different conversations. It came up in the focus groups. that you have a copy of the focus group report. Okay, so class 4 licenses, those keep coming up as well. But also looking at dual credit, and then John's suggestion of looking at the internship. Okay, so I think that is kind of our list of topics this group could work on. I think maybe what might be best is to work with that short list for now. Between now and July 1st, let's try to educate ourselves on some of these. One way you can do that is by reading the reciprocity report we'll share. Maybe if this group also wants to look at class 2, class 4, and class 8, just to familiarize ourselves. And then also class 5, specifically around internships.
And 8.
Okay. All right. And of course, we can add that the subcommittee will work with Tristan to set up a process. I don't know if we want to come up with some snazzy shorthand, but the counselor to administrator, C2A or something. So that subcommittee will start taking a look at the details of a pathway or pathways for counselors to become administrators. Okay. Great. Well, I saw Angela did have a question about process in terms of CISPAC, and maybe we want to look at the timeline slide real quick, which I think is after this one. Thanks again for doing all this driving, Crystal and Tristan. Okay, so this is the overall timeline for this group. So today's the 24th. So as I said, we will meet next Thursday, and then the following Thursday, July 8th. We will not meet on the 15th because there's a Board of Public Ed meeting. And then there are 2 sessions planned after that. So let's see, I don't know, McCall, how does CISPAC kind of factor into this? Would they be meeting or interacting?
Yeah, so CISPAC generally approves and makes recommendations based on the recommendations from OPI on Chapter 57 and Chapter 58 before they go to the Board of Public Ed. Okay. So CISPAC is meeting the day before the Board of Public Ed starts our meetings in July. They meet again in October with the Council of Deans. I think in the past they have asked them to have special meetings to adopt some of these things. Like the Board of Public Ed actually meets in September next. So if our work here was done, say July 29th, we could ask CISPAC to come in, review those recommendations, make a recommendation to the board before their September meeting. It's just the regularly scheduled meeting of CISPAC isn't until October.
Okay, so does that put a deadline on our work, a specific deadline?
I don't believe so. I mean, I also would say that's probably up to the committee. It's probably not up to me, but I think whenever the committee or this task force finishes their work, then it'll kind of depend where everything else falls. And, you know, we will certainly do what we need to on our end to make sure that we're being helpful to the process.
Okay.
If I, was there a specific request to have this counselor piece maybe pulled separately from the other pieces of chapter 57, though?
I think, and I was here, but I believe that came from the research and focus group work at the beginning, like the beginning stages of that I was not a part of, so I don't know 100%. But it did come from some sort of committee to address that first. And also I can tell you from being on the licensure committee, it's something that we get quite often from the field, and that we have to present as an unusual case that then goes to the Board of Public Ed. So I think it was just something that keeps coming up, and that's where it's started. I don't want to speak for Deputy Superintendent Allen in terms of where exactly. I can find that out though. But I think it was the hope was to have at least that piece finished if we wanted to adjust it or, you know, make revisions for the July sit back in Board of Public Ed. So that does kind of give us a timeline on that one. But of course, if we're not there yet, then we wouldn't want to rush it.
Yeah, Sharon, to Cheryl Allen, she did mention that she was hoping to do this one before the others, knowing that, or hoping that this wouldn't be or take as much time. I don't know if we'll get there for the deadline. Our items for the agenda packet are actually due tomorrow. So unless Cheryl makes a very nice, you know, recommendation or request that it be included, the agenda should be done by tomorrow. So it might not make it.
Okay, at any rate, then we'll those of us who said we'd serve on that subcommittee will be diligent in our responses as soon as Tristan gets us that email sent out. Thank you.
I'll do that first thing after this meeting, Sharon.
No problem.
How would it be bad to put it on the agenda in hopes that it's done, or is that frowned upon in terms of planning ahead?
Sorry, Crystal, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. What did you say?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I said, would it be frowned upon to put it on the agenda in hopes that we have it done, or is that too much?
So we actually did have it on our agenda, and we just got all of the agenda packet items from Sarah, and it wasn't included. So we actually just took it off. I think if you guys want to include it and have a placeholder, I'm going to let you guys have that conversation internally, but I think we're willing to do that. I mean, we did have that on there.
I guess what I would offer in that regard, and you know, I'm certainly only one member of this work group, but it's clear that changes that we make to one section of 57 will have impacts on other parts of chapter 57. So I guess I would offer very humbly that we be able to consider the recommendations as a whole before moving them forward. That said, I do appreciate the deputy superintendent's efforts to move this piece forward on the counseling to superintendent pathway, but it just doesn't seem like we're going to be there. And so then it seems to me that it would make sense for us to consider all of the pieces of 57 as a whole before any of them go forward, just because there could be implications for other parts of it that we hadn't thought of or discussed. So thanks.
Okay, we're at time here, so I know folks are busy, so thank you. I feel like we got some good clarity for this group. We have a good path forward for everyone's continued input and contributions around the C2A, the counselor to administrator pathway. And we have a shortish list of other topics that we will do some homework around and discuss next time and see if we're ready to prioritize and dive into any of those. So with that, thanks to all of you for making time for this. Thanks to any members of the public that might be listening in the background. And we will plan to see you all next Thursday at the same time. And have a good rest of your week.
Thank you, and thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you.